Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds.
Our first trial is actually over kind of adjacent that way, and that began in 2018. It was our Healthy Soils grant that we were awarded from the CDFA, and this was in partnership with the local resource conservation district and then also the Santa Rosa Junior College. And for that, we were really looking at the effects of two different regenerative farming treatments, which was compost and tillage, and trying to determine what the impact of that is on soil carbon sequestration, both at kind of the surface level and then the deeper kind of 15 to 30 centimeter like long-term carbon sequestration zone. And so we're in year 7 of that trial right now. We were only awarded grant funding for 5 years, but we decided that we wanted to extend that trial to 10 years because really the longevity of soil carbon once it's been sequestered, especially in terms of grape growing, hasn't really been studied for that long before. So this would be one of the longest studies of its kind. So we're committed to kind of seeing that through at least the 10-year mark, if not more.
It's crazy. We think we can do a trial and it takes a year. Every time it doesn't take a year, 3 years.
Right.
It's like, I didn't like scratch the surface.
So,
Well, especially when you're talking about Mother Nature. And
Because that's geologic time.
Yeah, there's so much.
yeah.
Looking for the magic pill.
Yeah, and like year 1 versus year 5 and now year 7, they were all very different. And so like when you're seeing those, like the fungal relationships and the microbial networks reforming, that takes time. And so you don't see in year 1 what you see in year 5 as far as the sequestration potential.
So do you have a lab in this area where you can actually check roots for mycorrhizal at all?
So we're studying that as part of this trial in partnership with UC Davis, and we're using their lab, but I think they outsource to, I want to say, Oregon's lab as well.
Yeah, that's, I think, where all
where
we got sunset.
Yeah. So then this study, this is a more recent one. This is in its 3rd year right now. This is our FAR trial, and this is replicated not only here, but in most of the Great Garden regions that we have within the company. And this is in partnership with UC Davis, Cal Poly, Skidmore, UC Berkeley. And this is looking at not only soil health and carbon sequestration, but also vine health, wine quality, water infiltration, kind of those mycorrhizal fungal relationships, and water infiltration. So you can see here the different treatment combinations. We're looking at
You called it the FAR trial.
the FAR, yeah.
What does that stand for?
That's where some of the funding came from, which is the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. So it was from them, the CDFA, and the USDA.
So we have alternative.
Yeah, so
Alternate till.
yeah, looking at minimal till, no till, cover crops, compost, and then grazing, and different combinations of those to see, again, what impact each of those have independently and combined together.
So let's talk, because we're in a vineyard, right? So it's not like an annual. When would tilling be? Before you put in a new plot of grapes? But do you ever do any actual tilling throughout? Because these grapes are going 30, 40, 50 years, ideally.
Yeah, I mean, and Craig, you can talk about this too. From a replanting perspective, a lot of times we'll leave an area fallow for a season or two, just to see what amendments the soils need or what sort of natural things we can do with it. So typically that's what happens. Sometimes we do add amendments to the soil based on the new varietal or rootstock. I think also, as you've seen with climate change, we're also looking at alternative rootstocks that are more drought resistant, disease resistant, and those, because they're always advancing those crops. So we're also looking. So there's 1,000 decisions that we're making.
You can do own root crops. You can do right.
Yeah, I mean, some vineyards will see the alternate row tilling. So yeah, and they'll till sort of throughout the year.
And the concept of the tillage is you're trying to get more percolation, more infiltration.
Yes, and that might be coupled with, in some vineyards, you've got to go in and deep drip at some stage. We do have some where you have a hard pan, and you get that perched water table. And, I think there's one of those vineyards in the pop in here about 17 years, and I think we've deep ripped it a couple or 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being mindful of the irrigation.
And like what we're trying to do with a lot of the cover crops that we've selected specifically like for this vineyard is loosen up soil compaction. One way to do that is through tillage, but what we think another way to do, or maybe a better way to do, is through cover crops and having those deep roots that are then breaking up the soil instead.
Sure.
And with less tractor passes, you have less soil compaction. And then by improving your soil health, you have better aeration, infiltration, all of that. It takes a lot longer though. Kind of tillage is the quick way to do that.
This is kind of a lot of colors you're seeing here, but this sort of shows a map of the vineyard. We're probably in this area.
We are, so if you orient it this way, we are in this area. Yeah.
You can see like these, they get color based on what the farming method is as well.
Mm-hmm.
We can send you a copy of that.
Sure.
If you'd like.
Now, what are you using for amendments, if any, then? Besides the organic compost or whatever, you're using any minerals, anything that do you top dress the vine itself, or do you do like broadcast stuff for that when you're composting? Do you broadcast it everywhere, including our rows, or how's that?
Yeah, so I mean, for compost, there's a variety of different ways. You can kind of broad spread it. You can directly apply it underneath the vines. We also have a compost tea maker, and through that, you can apply it through the drip system, or you can foliarly over the vines. But in addition to that, there's definitely still fertilizer. We stop to spray to prevent mildew and things like that. But here we're herbicide-free. And then trying to reduce pesticides and things of that nature as much as possible.
Sure.
Anything else?
Yeah, and certainly, targeting those sprays, gone are the days of, it's the second Monday of the month, so we're spraying. It's being very mindful of, say, weather conditions.
You're just looking for reduction of it, right? So that's the idea that I have, is that, we all love this concept of regenerative farming, right? We love this, and it takes a long time, and you're running a for-profit business here, right? So if your crop is in trouble, you're not going to let that crop go bad, and there's some easy solutions that industrial agriculture has given us. But the idea is we're going forward is to be able to reduce. So it's more of that conservative farming, or that conservation farming, or sustainable intensification, that kind of thing, where occasionally you need a little help, not from Mother Nature.
No.
It's moving until it becomes truly regenerative.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like, one of the things that, at least what I enjoy about working for these companies with family, it's multi-generational approach. So there is really this fundamental values and foundation the company has and the family has around protecting the land, because they want this to be in their family for hundreds, thousands of years if they can. And so there really is a more long-term vision for everything they do farming-wise.
And they live right near these vineyards or on these vineyards. And so they're not spraying things or trees that they wouldn't want to be in their own backyard.
Yeah.
So how about intercropping at all? When you're doing cover crops, what are the cover crops you guys have played with?
Oh, there's, so there's quite a few. So there's clovers, there's barleys, there's mustards, daikon radishes is a fun one that we have. Those are really great at loosening up the soil. You have vetch, you have, what else? We have crimson clover, we have...
And at that point, though, it's all kind of rain-fed, right? Because you can't put a whole system in for your roads or your...
Yeah. Yeah, we're not irrigating the cover crops separately. No.
That I think is sometimes the challenge if you want to do something. I'm going to start experimenting with using hemp down the center.
Oh, fun.
Or at least sun hemp, because hemp will remediate. It's still a taker, and it does need water, and it needs nitrogen and that kind of thing. But the deal is it'll go 2 meters deep. So it'll break up that hard tissue. And, it's not a bad one to interdrop with, but it's all
Fun idea.
a big old experiment.
Right. That's your Arizona property that you're doing that.
Yeah. So we're in, my partners are in Fresno, and Tom is kind of the head of the Cotton Gin Association. And so he's converted a cotton gin to to be able to process the hemp.
Oh, interesting.
And then he's growing several hundred acres, and we're doing the same thing in Blythe and Newmont. And but where Tom is, where UC Davis has been doing a 1 acre trial for a couple of years with us and stuff. And it's kind of a cool, amazing, that's what it is. It's playing with these crops that we all forgot even from 100 years ago that, hey, wow, this actually works.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the whole idea, is how do you truly get it to be regenerative? Well, it's tough when you got, this system is already in place, and you need more water, or, you know, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, and I think for us too, it's interesting, you know, because at the end of the day, our company is built on making the best wines, right? We're a wine company, and so that, you know, it's the vineyard manager's jobs to deliver grapes to Craig that he can make the best wines he possibly can, and also the consistency, because the La Crema consumer, they've been drinking these wines for decades, and so you can't all of a sudden one vintage like completely change its style, right? I mean, you have variations in it.
You'd have to have a new brand,
right? Yeah, it's you know, that's also like, as we think about these practices and adopting new regenerative farming practices, there's also the eye on the winemaking and making sure that you know, we're not completely diverting from what he wants to make and the style, and
that's really the whole concept of you know, sustainable things. Is the number one thing is your company has to be sustainable. You have to be profitable, because you can't create a new model to replace an old model unless it's viable. You know, it just doesn't work. I mean, you can have all the great intentions in the world. And what's kind of crazy, though, but we talked about the trials that you guys are doing. They take, you know, you thought you were going to do 3 or 5 years. Okay, it's like, okay, except for we didn't think of this, that, or the other. And the other thing is all these variables. Right? So, you know, we try something, oh, that didn't work. Well, did we try it right? Or was it that time of the year, or that year, that climate that year, that rainfall, or whatever? There's so many different things. It's so hard to isolate. And that's why this whole holistic approach, it's a circular approach, you have to keep working at it, because you're really in a point of discovery.
Yeah. And it's also too, you know, Alex was mentioning, beyond just the soil analysis we're doing, we're also doing a major winemaking study on all these. So we are separating these grapes. You want to talk more about that from a winemaking perspective? Because I could sort of talk in generality.
Isn't it just too early? I mean, you're going through an existing crop.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny from the winemaking side of things, because now that is like UC Davis are basically running with that. So there are select parcels that, certainly from this vineyard, there's some from Oregon, there's some from Monterey, right? That ultimately find their way over to Davis, and they do these little micro ferments, do all the analysis. And at some stage, there will be winemaker tasting panels. Okay, to look at the results.
It's just, to me, it's like, okay, really, you just change things for a few years and you're expecting the end product to change. I mean, the crop these are put in the like the 90s, the late 80s, the 90s.
89 for this block here.
So they've been in the ground for 30 years. And now we're amending a little bit of the soil for a few minutes, you know, and we're expecting that particular vine to have all brand new characteristics or leopard, and it just takes some time.
You know, we see it when we're tasting our wines, because not all of the trial that goes to Davis, we bring some of it of bloodwood actually into the Crema and make a commercial wine out of it. So we see, but this block here, for example, you know, this block's really good this year, but if it's only the second year of the trial, I don't think you can put it all down to the trial. And as you were saying, there's ups and downs and all over the places with the climate. Yeah, we 2 years ago came out the back of a pretty long and extensive drought. And, you know, now we've got water. Are the wines better as a result of what we're doing here? Or is it just because we've got water? So I think
And that's been winemaking since the beginning of winemaking in the 1800s or whatever.
Exactly.
Because and so when you have that bad year, now as the farmer, you didn't make any money, which is not a good thing. But if you're collecting wine and sometimes that drought wine is, better than the wine where you had water that year. Right. So it's,
So we go back, I think it was 2021, that we were really in the pretty firm grip of the drought.
Yeah.
And there were vineyards where we had our water cut, and those wines did wonderfully that year. So it gives us that, well, why are we putting so much water on?
they love to be stressed, but that scares the hell out of you.
And I think with modern technology, it's made wine growing not easier, but definitely consistent, and also giving them the tools to where they can make changes really quickly. And so we have weather stations here, so our vineyard managers can be at home having dinner with their families and check their iPhones and see like, oh, okay, something's happening here that, we can measure, in between vine rows, the temperatures at the, at the root level versus, at the vine level, and then the evaporation. So we'd have some evaporation meters, because that can really tell you how the vines are struggling, not struggling, or just based on what the, what the humidity is, at the vine level. Yeah, so there's a lot of tools there.
Well, if you look at that piece of machinery over there, this is another study that we're doing. Again, this one's with UC Davis and some Great Bex researchers, and that's looking at specifically the evapotranspiration that Sean was talking about. And this is looking at measuring the real-time evapotranspiration that's happening in the vineyard and comparing that to a satellite model of what they think that it is. So they're working on fine-tuning that really large-scale model so that eventually they can use that to help inform irrigation decisions for the vineyard.
Now, what controllers are you using? Do you guys get involved with the winemaking? How about the irrigation system itself? Do you have, like a lot of the new controllers are cloud optimizers. Do you have that? Have you changed out and gone to more sophisticated control systems?
Yeah, in our vineyards, and some of it's based on like replanting, to where if we're replanting a block or a vineyard, then we bring in the new technology. Sometimes we change it as the seasons happen, just based on
it's all a central control system?
It's vineyard by vineyard. So we do have some vineyards where honestly it's almost like a row by row, where you can sort of select which ones you want to irrigate, which ones you don't. Sometimes it's more on a block level, to where you've got like a 3-acre block that are all in separate systems. And so it's all it's different for every place we have.
So you showed me that patchwork of the whole map of the whole place.
Mm-hmm. Each one of these would be considered a different block.
And are you doing different varietals, or do you have?
There are throughout this map here. There are different varietals.
Here's the varietal map.
Different rootstock and clone interactions on the Pinot side.
So your harvesting is all slightly different.
Yeah.
It's not just the whole thing in one go.
So we'll pick from this vineyard for sparkling wine. We might get started next week on that. And we also make a late harvest Riesling here. So we're sort of bookending the harvest. Yeah.
It doesn't get confused.
No. And I think too, there's been a very subtle shift in our winemaking philosophies and our picking decisions over the years. If I go back to 2007, my first harvest here, if I put fruit over the scale that wasn't 24.5 bricks, I was going to get a sort of, please explain type question.
Why is this better?
Yeah, and so now I think it results in a much more distinctive family of wines at the other end. You pick some of your Chardonnay, say at 22.5 bricks. You get some at 23, 23.5, 24, 24.5. So it just gives you a broader color palette to blend your wines from, but it also mitigates risk of just letting all your fruit hang out and then riding through 110 degrees.
So you might blend different based on different harvests and different bricks.
Yep.
And you might have, X number of barrels, and then you start playing, with that. And that's
so this is the block 33. Yeah, this is the big rock of Chardonnay. Okay, it runs from one soil, runs to the next. And, I will say in our blend IDs, it'll be block Cerealese, block 33, and then we'll have an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I through to L. So we might get 24 individual ferments coming off of this round.
Do you do it by block though? You can't be like easy enough to do one row.
No.
They come back or whatever.
We might say, okay, I want these 5 rows here.
Okay.
And because we're seeing something in the flavor, or the growth habit, that sort of, what's this different? So we might do that, but more often than not, we're picking sort of truckloads, so 20 tons at a time out of it.
And you do a combination of blends, but you also do single varietals. The single varietals, the way you just harvest it, not a blend, but you have the ability to be artistic with that.
So if we make there's about 8 wines come off this vineyard under the Cerealese label. So the Chardonnay, for example, that could come from 10, 15 different patches of Chardonnay throughout the vineyard. And so we'll bring them in and ferment this block separate to the block, based on the climate, based on when we're picking that. But this block here, for example, we might be picking in this block for about 2.5 or 3 weeks from our spark picks to the end of the Chardonnay picks. So the flavors do change over that time. And so the idea for us is to keep everything separate because we want more options to put the wine together from.
Well, to add a little more difficulty to the equation, now this is, this is not mechanically harvested at all.
This is not. So this is all hand.
And then we've had a tremendous explosion of labor rates and also a lack of labor throughout all industries, right? And this isn't, it sounds romantic and fun, but picking is hard work.
It's
It's all day long and it's hot and it's, and so how you've got that coupled with the climate. So tell me, over these last decade or 2 decades, have you seen the climate really affect, because it's hard to separate weather patterns from climate patterns, right? This year you had rain. It doesn't mean this year was not, the globe wasn't warming. It was still happening, but you got a lot of rain this year. 2 years before it was, drier. So what are you seeing when it comes to the climate? Are you worried about any varietals that you're growing? Just like Pinot Noir, I think of that and Nebbiolo as needing a lot more fog, a lot more moisture, cooler. And are you seeing that? Are you worried that that's happening?
Yes and no. I think that there are some areas of the Russian River, perhaps in the most northern parts, as you get closer to Alexander Valley, that maybe have historically been a bit too warm for Pinot Noir. And maybe they're not on the ideal soils there either.
Right.
And so I see and have seen some of those Pinot Noir plantings go away and to be replaced with Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc. The weather has been, let's call it erratic, for the last sort of 15 years. And, if we go back to 2010, it was quite a cool growing season. And so everybody leased their vines and exposed all the fruit. And then we got 4 days of 110. I think it got up to 115 degrees. And so that was the last time that we all did that. So now we're sort of just being a little bit more sort of deliberate about our leafing regimes and leaving a bit more leaf cover on the grapes. And so, I think as long as we continue to adapt our farming to match the climate, then we should still be in pretty good shape to continue making these wines to a world-class level.
Now, the big competitor with the Pinot California is Willamette.
And we have wineries up there.
Yeah. Oh, you do.
We're very so we're very
different products.
And La Crema actually makes a wine, a Pinot Chard.
Yeah. And do you find it? I mean, I shouldn't say I'm talking to California growers here. But do you find it that the Pinots here are even somewhat competitive with Willamette?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we've been making wine in the Willamette Valley since 2012.
Okay.
And just if we think holistically about our entry into that part of US winemaking, we had to make a wine that was true to the Willamette Valley, but it also had to be true to the Crema's family of wines.
Mm.
And we were somewhat lucky in a sense that we started to encounter some warmer growing seasons up there. So it fit pretty nicely into what we're doing. And yes, it may be cooler overall there, but then there are other factors. You've got longer days, you've got more light interception. So while your heat may not be as high, the light provides that light.
I always wondered why there's not more Nebbiolo attempts up there. Was it similar to Piedmont and Alba and the amount of moisture they have in here?
I'd say it's probably mostly just marketplace reasons where commercially I think less consumers are drinking Nebbiolo than they are Pinot Noir, and so I think it's a hard business model because you sort of, I think in the U.S.
It's funny.
You have to create consumer demand for Nebbiolo, and
I guess
creating that marketing campaign. That's a huge.
Isn't that funny, right? It's not because people don't want to leave their comfort level, and I find throughout your life parallels your wine drinking. Right? As you're younger, there's certain. When I first started drinking wines, I'd get anaphylactic shock. And it was from the sulfites. And then there's not a winemaker in the world who admits they use sulfites, but sulfites, are added at times. And I just got constricted, and I had to work through it. Fortunately, I worked through it, and it doesn't bother me anymore. But, I would go from back then, cab was, the big thing. Napa was all about cab. Sonoma was cab, right? Cab country. And it's great that we ventured away a little bit, but I have friends, that's all they'll drink is a Napa cab.
Yep.
And then, as I travel around the world and I try different things, so at first Tempranillos, when I went to Spain, I was like, I just wasn't used to it. Now, great.
Yeah. Yep.
And the Nebbiolo, I think, is now my current favorite of all. I think it's so much more elegant than Pinot Noir, for instance. But it's funny because you're right. If the consumers are not buying it, you're not going to grow it. And it's a huge investment in marketing.
Yeah. And sometimes too, if you're because Oregon specifically, it's a lot of small farms and a lot of small vineyards. So that's a huge capital expense and risk for, to be, no one wants to be the first one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it works out for you, right?
Well, if everybody's buying what
if you're the first one,
why you change?
Yeah,
it,
and
right?
if you're the first one, it's a low risk. But I think, putting Nebbiolo up there can be a big risk.
I think what we've seen, and certainly was a surprise to me, is the rise of Oregon Chardonnay. Pinot Noir is well rooted, and everybody knows Oregon Pinot Noir very well, but the Chardonnays coming out of there are spectacular.
Yeah.
And so that was a surprise. I thought it was Pinot Noir country, and we started seeing Chardonnay.
Well, they do the Chardonnay in Piedmont too with the Nebbiolo. It depends on the aspect of the grow, right? But the Chardonnays, again, it's kind of this weird little bias I have over the years, and I'm probably remembering things from 40 years ago, but the reason I don't really like American Chardonnays is they use American oak. And I think American oak was a way to mask. It made it, standardized. It's like a McDonald's. The Blue Moon, if you're starving, you go to McDonald's and you have a hamburger. But that was the issue I had with American Chardonnays, is because they all kind of tasted the same. There wasn't, again, that sophistication. Now, you guys, you play around with your oaks?
Oh, absolutely.
And
no, we French, but we use different forests from France.
Right.
Different toasting levels across those forests.
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing, insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.